Hey, everybody, it's another good day of recovery. Today, we're going to talk about step 12. Step 12 often, I'll admit, sometimes gets lost in the shuffle. We got through steps 10 and 11. We're doing daily inventory. And some people are really reluctant to start working with others. And we're going to learn today by going into the big book how important that is. And so, just starting on page 89, working with others. Practical experience shows that nothing will so much ensure immunity from drinking or your drug of choice as intensive work with other alcoholics or addicts. It works when other activities fail. Like really. So why wouldn't we want to help people get through the steps quick enough to and thorough enough, but to then get them to step 12? Help them start to carry the message with others. And I've had some time to think about all this, and I've learned not to think about why it works, but it seems to work. It really seems to work. Maybe it's the principle we learn by helping others, and we learn these steps better. If you teach someone how to cook or or do something by demonstrating it, you'll actually learn it better. And it's not by figuring it out. I'm not sure. Maybe it's because it pulls us out of ourselves. Maybe it helps us realize I can't get people sober, but I can certainly point the way. But it tells us it works when other activities fail. This is our 12th suggestion. Carry this message to other alcoholics. You can help when no one else can. Okay? Life will take on new meaning. To watch people recover, to see them help others, to watch loneliness vanish, to see a fellowship grow about you, to have a host of friends. This is an experience you must not miss. We know you will not want to miss it. Frequent contact with newcomers and with each other is the bright spot of our lives. That's true for me. Really true. Really, really true. That's my experience. I would read all this, underline it, but we're going to go over some important points that I think are important. And this is going to be in parts. So this is going to be how to approach someone, like your very first contact with someone. What is it that you talk about? Now, I'll be honest, some of this I think is useful. Some of it I just see as manipulative, too well thought out. Bless the heart of Bill Wilson, he was the salesperson. So he just had that kind of running in his veins. And today, some of this might look codependency. But then I think sometimes with codependency recovery, then we're so quick to go the other direction that we don't want to get too involved. So then the poor addict is kind of left distant. And we're going to go over a pamphlet by Clarence Snyder on his way of sponsorship, which I think is useful. He was very early in AA. And then you look at that by today's standards, we might go, wow, that's kind of boundary crossing. But, maybe people need that kind of love and support. I've worked with many addicts, and some have said, no, I would not actually be here had it not been my sponsor. This person said, hey, we're going to go to a meeting today. They literally came to the house and picked them up and dragged them to a meeting. I don't really approach things that way, but that's how this person's experience was. They said they really just helped me get there. So in talking with people, we share our own stories. And it says here, so cooperate, never criticize. To be helpful is our only aim. When you discover a prospect, there's a sales talk for Alcoholics Anonymous, find out all you can about him. If he does not want to stop drinking, don't waste time trying to persuade him. He points out you may spoil a later opportunity. So this is not a program where we try to rope people into getting sober or give them a spiritual experience that they're really not interested. I find it's best to say, be kind, be aware that they may contact you later, but there's nothing you can do. Pray is really important. But as far as talk and all that, It says it might actually make things worse. They say this advice is given for his family also. They should be patient, realizing that they're dealing with a sick person. Another way to put this is that he or she is dealing with an affliction, an addiction, a spiritual force that is blinding them, making them despondent, making them self-pity, miserable, resentaholism, all that stuff that kind of makes you want to be not near them. And so why get in and wrestle with them to try to get them away from the life they want? I think it's best just to let them be by themselves. Of course, if they're suicidal, you have to step in. So, I mean, that's good mental health advice as a rule. But for the most part, they stick their hand in a fire and they want us to feel the pain. It's best if we don't feel the pain. But if there is any indication that he wants to stop, have a good talk with the person most interested in him, usually his wife. This sounds like behind the scenes. So I put a little note. This feels dishonest, manipulative, and poor boundaries. So I skipped that part. But what's interesting is, he says, find out all you can. See how you would like him to approach you if the tables were turned. So this is just common sense empathy. We know what it was like to be in denial. In fact, some of us might have forgotten what it was like, and we need to be reminded that it took us a long time, sometimes, to get sober. Don't deal with him when he is very drunk. That's kind of easy when a person is drunk or high on drugs. It gets weird or more difficult if the person's like struggling with codependency or work addiction. They've just been adrenalized all day. They come home and then they come and we start arguing. Or food addiction, sex addiction. It's subtler because you're not sure when are they drunk and when are they not drunk. It says wait for the end of a spree or at least a lucid interval. Then let his family or friend ask him if he wants to quit for good and if he would go to any extreme to do so. By the way, this is such a fascinating passage here because this kind of flies in the face of some tools, and I guess I can say what they are, but I mean this so respectful. There are daily renewals, kind of like vows, like just for today, I'll do this, just for today, just for today. I wouldn't do that with someone if they just want to quit just for today and then they're free to go back later. That doesn't make any sense to me. A person has to get to a place where they don't want it and it's causing them more harm than good. If a person says yes, then this attention will be drawn to you as a person is recovered. Like he or she will want what you have. But if he's still wanting to use the drug and finding enjoyment from that, what can be done? Al-Anon or programs to help you as a recovering person from that helps you realize I don't want to fix, I don't want to try to feel their pain for them or throw pillows under them before they land on the hard cement. So a lot of us have a hard time, and me included, have a hard time feeling sadness or fear or seeing suffering in my own life as well as others. There's almost as if seeing suffering people, we can't tolerate that. So that then if we're not trying to alleviate our own suffering from our drug of choice, we're trying to alleviate the suffering of someone else. And yet suffering might actually be useful. In the long version of the Serenity Prayer, there's a phrase that's beautiful. It says, we see that through hardship, it's a pathway to peace. Okay, I think it says that. If there's a great advice, if he doesn't want to see you, never force yourself upon him. I'm old enough to, in the old days, there was a treatment center that says we can help people that don't want help. Yeah, I'm sure you can, especially when you're making $60,000. You'll find a way to help that person, even if they don't want help. And maybe things have gotten better, maybe not, because I've seen this happen where they get roped in, they get as much money, and then they're out in a week, and then they go use. Like, what a waste of money. Okay. It talks about strategies. It says, Bert, urge them not to be over anxious, meaning the family, for that might spoil matters. When possible, avoid meeting a man through his family. It's better to go through a doctor institution. So again, it so feels micromanaging, but I think it's a good read. Read what's useful to you. Call on him while he is still jittery. He may be more receptive than when depressed. Wow, interesting. It may be too much strategy here, or maybe not. Maybe Bill has something where he found that if he's jittery, maybe more anxious than really depressed, he's more likely to want to get better. But see, the key here is pray and ask God for direction. That's everything. Just ask God to direct you what to say, what not to say. I think it's really cool. I mean, this sounds funny, but a lot of people that I'm working with and they're wanting to do step 12, they are almost really nervous in doing this. They're nervous in working with others. They don't want to say they don't want to say the wrong thing or do the wrong thing. And it's like their hearts are really great. And because they see that they want to be helpful, I would say it's important to just honor that, but also understand that just pray and ask God for direction. He'll guide you. Perhaps there's others that don't really take it seriously enough and are quick to give advice and kind of go in too strong. And it's just basically codependency. But again, codependency can be, if we get out of the director's seat and let God direct, everything works out. Tell him, like, this might be a good side story. Sometimes I am working with someone and wow, the timing's a little bit strange, the scheduling, how are we going to fit all these steps in like a week? I take a deep breath and say, God, what do you want to have happen? And it usually works out instead of me fretting about it. We tell him or her about our drinking or our addiction habits, symptoms, and experiences to encourage him to speak to himself. It's like us opening ourselves up like a book, and they get to see some of it. They either want what we have or not, but I do see it work like magic, where people open up and they said, I never thought I'd open up like this, but they open up. Be careful to never moralize or lecture. Yeah, that's not carrying the message. That's like trying to make someone see something. If his mood is light, tell him humorous stories of your escapade. Get him to tell some of his. I'm not sure how this is helpful. Maybe it's because I'm a therapist and people don't want to come in and talk about happy things. They're ready to talk about the painful things and then to get on with it. Maybe this is a strategy that helps him understand that he's or she has addiction issues. And then we give him an account of the struggles you made to stop. Sharing the part of your story where you really struggled, or you spent another year doing X, Y, and Z, and it took a long time, or how you were tricked into thinking you could really control it. All that will be useful. And you'll almost know what you need to know when you need to know it. Actually, that's kind of another slogan, but it says you'll need to know what you need to know when you need to know it. I'll say that again slower. You'll know what you need to know when you need to know it. If we surrender to God, we'll share what we need to share when we need to share it. Actually, that's a good phrase, and it just came to me right now. Yeah, we'll share what we need to share when we need to share it. So what that means for me, and I see this, I just say, God, I know the basic patterns of where these things are in the book, but help me to share what's useful. And I've seen that in the last 6 months. I shared some things that I didn't think I would share, and yet the person really had a change that was like dramatic because I shared some personal stuff and it really made a difference. Okay. If you're satisfied that he is a real alcoholic, begin to dwell on the hopeless feature of the malady. So it seems like we're judging as to whether someone's a real alcoholic or not. I kind of go at it this different. I kind of go, well, it's for them to discover whether they have that or not. But after a while, you do get a sense of, yeah, this does sound like alcoholism or drug addiction or sex addiction or compulsive spending. Yeah, now that I think about it, I'll put this in context. Say like a person was struggling with compulsive spending or compulsive debting. And from my own experience, how the queer mental condition surrounding that first drink prevents normal functioning of the willpower. So a person then goes, I'm stressed about money. I shouldn't be spending money like this, but we go out and spend it more. We don't track our expenditures. We don't open up mail. We avoid. We can share from our experience that. And if you get a sense that they have that too, it could be useful. So I can see that maybe that's not as manipulative. Here I have a key point, like if I share how I've been prideful, stubbornness, self-will, rationalizing, minimizing. Yeah, that was not helpful to me. But I do it in a way where I just share about my story. And maybe, and I use a lot of phrases, maybe this didn't happen to you, but this is what happened to me. And they could go, yeah, it happened to you and it didn't happen to me. Now I'm fine. That's okay. It may have planted seeds and maybe they aren't an alcoholic, you know? I think there's some value in staying humble about that versus I know more about your life than you do. Yeah. Continue to speak of alcoholism or addiction as an illness, a fatal malady. And this is a key point for me. People, you'll feel them just so ashamed. They're reeking with shame. But it's like, well, this is an illness. And I can go from being shame about myself, not hardly anymore. I can feel shamed about new stuff. But the old stuff, yeah, no, I processed that. It was an addiction. But in around me or there's family members or stuff like that, if I see it from the lens of just it, like why are they doing this and all that, it's like craziness. If I go, well, this is an addiction, this is like an illness, this is what addicts do, and then I have compassion, I'm not mad, I understand this is a disease and it's going to run its course. Unless the person's going to say, I want to get better. I'm tired of living like this. Great. Keep his attention focused on, well, actually, this is worth adding. Talk about the conditions of body and mind which accompany it. I do this a lot. I talk about this does more than just about using your drug of choice. This is about how it affects your mood, your relationships, your pocketbook, your spiritual relationship, your work. Addiction is so insidious, it affects everything, even though we think it's so compartmentalized. Now, this sounds so manipulative. Keep his attention focused mainly on your personal experiences. If I have that kind of power. Again, this sounds so salesy. Explain that many are doomed to never realize the predicament. Yeah, I just wouldn't go that strong. But you may talk to him about the hopelessness of alcoholism because you offer a solution. That is cool. I do realize that is in our conversation. We can talk about how dark it is and how bad it is. But see, I've experienced a solution. And if you're doing step 12, even if you're only a few weeks sober, you may offer a solution of what God's doing in your life, doing for you what you could not do for yourself. Page 93, tell him exactly what happened to you. No one can argue with that. No one can argue with that. Stress the spiritual feature freely. And now that I think about it, I'm going to talk about this. There are many, 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 many books on how to get better from mental conditions and problems. And they talk about the problem out here, and they talk about it from a education and a science and a academic, and it's out here. And it's very arguable, and it's very non-personal. It's very non-story like. And I just think that people's stories is so powerful. Like, I can tell you what happened, what it was like before, and I can tell you what happened afterwards. And there's not a sense of someone going to disagree. It's like, well, I know what it was like. That's what finding God in these steps did for me. And that's why I can be pretty calm when people say, well, isn't there another way? And it's like, I wish if there was another way, I would offer it. But I've never seen anybody really recover from an addiction without this. And people go, well, goodbye then as a therapist. And it's like, I understand that. I'm meaning recover in a different way than they may be meaning recover, like just to stop using heroin. And they can do that for a while, but will they stay stopped? And will they get rid of all the surrounding stuff? That's where I can stress the spiritual feature freely. And if the person is shy on the matter of God, like agnostic atheist, make it emphatic that he does not need to agree with your conception of God. You can choose any conception he likes, provided it makes sense to him. The main thing that he be willing to believe in a power greater than himself, and that he live by spiritual principles. It says, stress the spiritual feature freely. This is interesting. I'm going to talk about this. I think in our culture, we're just too afraid to talk about the spiritual feature freely. Things have changed after the pandemic and a lot of things happening. I was able to talk more about spiritual things than ever. People were coming in talking about death and talking about the mess of the world. And it would be easy to point to politics or science and say, really? So are we putting our faith in that? Look how well it worked. And I think people were more open spiritually. And you can do it in a polite manner. Like, I didn't get preachy, or maybe someone thought so, but no, I just talk about, do you think there's another world, like a spiritual world, or do you think material world is all there is? Like C.S. Lewis, a famous, children's author and theologian and really cool guy, he was a devout atheist. Like, he had solved it in his mind. And a great side documentary story is called The Most Reluctant Convert, I think. Really well done. I just watched it. But he says that when he came to the conclusion that if it's totally materialistic, then all his thoughts, everything about his personhood of what he knew about life and his person was basically atoms and electrons firing in his skull. Yep. If that's it. And he realized he couldn't think like that because it doesn't really accurately describe his experience. Yeah, but I think we're more than a bag of chemicals. I think that we are beings with spirits, that there are things that science can't explain. And by saying that, it's not putting down science. It's just, we just don't know everything. And even in mind-body medicine, there's tons of maladies that doctors politely say, well, we don't know what causes this. And now we find if people go look for a spiritual or emotional solution, they get much better. And here they had backaches for 10 years and get better. So there's a humility built into this. If we just say, maybe there's things beyond us, maybe what you're afflicted with is a spiritual force, namely the addiction, that tries to get you to use it, tries to get you to be resentful, tries to get you fearful. And maybe there's a power greater than yourself. So you can see that in step 12, there's a sense you're sharing what God has done for you. And here's the thing, if we go too politically correct on this, we don't want to offend, then we don't share the spiritual feature freely, then we're watering down the program, and we're more likely to use human effort to try, like the membership in the program, the fellowship, the readings, making program calls to get sober. And I just don't think that that's sustaining. It just doesn't work. People won't always be there, but God would. It talks here about prospect, meaning that person you're working with may belong to a religious denomination. His religious education and training may be far superior to yours. In that case, he is going to wonder how you can add anything to what he already knows. But he will be curious to learn why his own convictions have not worked and why yours seem to work so well. Yeah, and this is kind of a strange point. Like, I've worked with people of faith, and sometimes to work quicker as a therapist, I say, well, if things were working out so well, then why are you here? Like, you've been going to church, your particular church, or had your set of ideas about God and what this meant, and it's 10 years later and you're still struggling and things are getting worse. Then I point out how the Oxford groups were kind of, I think, sprung up. Of course, I wasn't there, but this is my guess, is that they sprung up because the answers weren't found in traditional Protestant churches, that there was something missing, and what was missing is early Christian practices or steps. So what my experience is that when people are willing to set aside their own ideas and start fresh and say, God, okay, I don't know you. That's why I like the set aside prayer. God, help me set aside everything I think I know about you. Help me set aside everything I think I know about myself. Help me set aside everything I think I know about the steps, and help me set aside everything I think, everything I think I know about the disease and everything I think I know about the steps. Grant that I may see you as you really are, myself as I really am, the disease as it really is, and the true steps for healing. It's a very safe prayer, because if we're sincere and we want to know God better, we'll know God better. And if there's things that I had misunderstood, they'll be removed. Same thing about myself. I'll see myself better. I will see this disease as it really is, and I'll see the real steps. Yeah, so it's a very cool thing. And so we come at this with humility, and that's a great tool. I use it all the time, and I could use it more, actually. You could take that prayer to any problem you have. Just instead of the word addiction, my situation. Help me to set aside everything I think I know about this problem or situation, or my family members, or the government, or whatever you're upset by, and help me to see things the way you want me to see things. He may be an example of that truth, that faith alone is insufficient. To be vital, faith must be accompanied by self-sacrifice and unselfish constructive action. So most often that they didn't know what to do. And again, look at Oxford groups, which had 4 basic steps. 12 steps became 12 steps. But if you actually take the steps and practice the steps, you'll be sober. It says, but call attention to the fact that however deep his faith and knowledge, he could not have applied it, or he would not drink. Wow, that's kind of tough. Perhaps your story will help him see where he has failed to practice the very precepts he knows so well. We represent no particular faith or denomination. We're dealing only with general principles common to most denominations. So anyway, I think this is a good place to take a break, because this is going to be in parts. And this part was about how do you really start approaching that person that you're working with in step 12. The next section, we'll be talking about how to actually help them through the steps and to practice that. And then it says to practice these principles in all our affairs. So that's the third part of step 12 is how do we practice this in all our affairs? So you take care. Have a great day of recovery.